You know that person who posts something and genuinely doesn't care how many likes it gets? The one who makes a decision and doesn't need anyone to tell them it was the right one. The one who wears what they want, say what they think, moves in the direction they choose, and somehow seems completely unbothered by whether the room approves or not. The one who doesn't seem to need anyone's opinion to feel okay about themselves. And from the outside, it looks like confidence. It looks like they figured something out that most people spend their whole lives chasing. Like they cracked a code everyone else is still struggling with. But here's the thing, not everyone who does not need any validation got there the same way. And some of them built it through something much heavier. Today, we are breaking down the psychology of people who don't need validation. The one society calls confident, but science says the story is far more layered than that. Firstly, let's understand what validation actually is. Because the word gets thrown around a lot, but most people don't fully understand what's happening psychologically when you seek it or when you stop needing it. Validation is simply external confirmation that what you feel, think, or do is acceptable, normal, worth something. From the very beginning of human development, validation from caregivers is essential. A baby cries and someone responds. A toddler shows a drawing and someone smiles. A child shares an idea and someone listens. That loop. Doing something and receiving a positive response is how humans learn the exit in a meaningful way in the world. Psychologists call this mirroring, and it is not weakness, it is biology. Every human being is weird to seek some level of it. So, when someone appears to need none of it at all, the question is not just how impressive that is. The question is how they got there, and the answer is almost never as simple as they just have high self esteem. They are actually two very different types of people who don't need validation. And from the outside, they can look identical, but on the inside, they are completely different. The first type arrived at independence through genuine inner work. They spend time understanding themselves, their values, their limits, what actually matters to them versus what they were told should matter. They build a relationship with themselves solid enough that external opinions stop being the foundation their confidence stood on. Psychologists call this secure autonomy. It is the healthiest version of not needing validation. These people don't need approval because they have already approved of themselves. Not perfectly, not arrogantly, but genuinely. They know who they are, and actually, knowledge is stable enough to stand on without outside support. The second type is more complicated and more common than most people realize. Some people stop needing validation because they stopped expecting it. This is the version nobody talks about, and it is the one that looks strongest from the outside but often carries the heaviest weight. When a child grows up in an environment where validation was consistently withheld, something eventually shifts. They stop asking for it. Not because they no longer want it, but because wanting something you never receive becomes too painful to keep doing. So the brain adapts, it reroutes, it builds an internal system to replace the external one that was never reliable. It learns to generate its own sense of okay from within because looking outward for it only ever led to disappointment. Psychologists call this defensive self sufficiency, and it is not the same as healthy independence, even though it produces similar behavior on the surface. The person with defensive self sufficiency does not need validation because they trained themselves out of needing it the hard way. through years of reaching for approval and coming back empty, through learning that depending on others for their sense of worth was a guaranteed path to pain. Their independence is not freedom, it's armor. Here's something that might surprise you. Research consistently shows that people who genuinely don't need external validation tend to perform better at work, in creative fields, in leadership, in almost every area that requires sustained effort over time. The reason is straightforward. When your motivation comes from within, it does not fluctuate based on whether other people are watching or applauding. You don't need the audience to keep going. You work because the work itself means something to you. You make decisions based on your own values rather than what will look best to others. Psychologists call this intrinsic motivation, and decades of research show it produces deeper engagement, more creativity, and more long term fulfillment than doing things for external reward. The person who creates because they love creating will outwork the person who creates to be praised. Every single time, not because they are more talented, because their fuel source does not run out when the compliment stops. But there is a shadow side to this almost nobody discusses. People don't need validation are often also people who struggle deeply with receiving it. You compliment them and they deflect. You tell them they did something well and they immediately minimize it. You express genuine appreciation that looks slightly uncomfortable, like you handed them something they don't know what to do with. Because here is the psychology: if you build your entire world around not needing anything from other people, receiving something from other people disrupts the whole system. It creates a kind of psychological dissonance. Accepting praise means acknowledging that someone else's opinion has weight, and for someone who survived by stripping external opinions of their weight, that feels threatening even when the opinion is positive. Psychologists call this positive feedback version, and it's far more common in highly independent people than most research initially expected. The same walls that keep criticism from destroying you keep kindness from fully reaching you. Let's talk about this shows up in relationships, because this is where the true cost of not needing validation often becomes visible. In relationships, some people of mutual validation is not weakness, it's connection. Telling someone their feeling makes sense. Telling someone their efforts matters. Telling someone you see them and what you see is good. That's not dependency, that's intimacy. But the person who built their psychology around not needing any of this can struggle enormously in close relationships. Partners of these people often describe a specific loneliness, being with someone who seems completely self contained, who never seems to need reassurance, who functions perfectly well whether you are there or not, and wondering quietly whether you actually make a difference to them at all. The independent person is not trying to make their partner feel irrelevant. They just never learned how to need people in the visible, expressed way that makes other feels necessary. There is one more version of this worth naming. Some people who appear not to need validation have simply gotten extremely skilled at not showing that they do. Because in certain environments, needing approval is seen as weak. In tough households, in competitive workplaces, in cultures where socialism is rewarded and sensitivity is punished, people learn very quickly that wanting validation is something you keep private. So they perform indifference, they practice the unbothered face until it becomes second nature. They build a public identity around not caring what people think, while private checking every room they walk into for sign for approval. Psychologists call this impression management, and the exhaustion of maintaining it is enormous. because you are not actually free from needing validation. You are just doing all the needing in secrets. So, what does genuine freedom from validation actually look like? It does not look like not caring about anything. It does not look like arrogance. It does not look like stone cold indifference to other people's perspective. It looked like someone who can hear criticism without collapsing, who can receive praise without deflecting, who can make an unpopular decision without needing the room to immediately agree, who can sit with their own choice long enough to evaluate them honestly before looking around to see what everyone else thinks. It looks like someone who has a stable enough relationship with themselves that other people's opinion become information rather than verdicts. Not irrelevant, just not the whole story. So, if this is you, hear this. Whether you arrived at independence through genuine inner work or through years of learning not to need what you were not going to get, your strength is real. But strength and opponents are not opposites. You can be completely grounded in who you are and still let people matter to you. You can be deeply self sufficient and still let someone's love reach you. You cannot need validation and still appreciate it when it is genuine. Not needing the world's approval is powerful, but letting the right people in even a little is not weakness. It is the bravest thing a truly independent person can do. And if this video quietly described something about you that you have never heard the exact words for, subscribe, because next time we are going into the psychology of people who are always calm in a crisis but fall apart in the quiet. And I promise you it connects directly to everything we just talked about.